how long is this trade war going to be?
Well, I don't think anyone can see the end in sight at this point, especially given how both sides tend to be really digging in. Even though it's a holiday in China today, the Mid-Autumn Festival, the Chinese government, of course, did put in place those retaliatory tariffs that you already mentioned. They also released a white paper on U.S.-China trade, accusing the United States of trade bullyism, taking no responsibility. And so this looks set to continue to go from Beijing into the near to midterm future. On the U.S. side, as you know, President Trump has already said that he would retaliate against China for pursuing additional tariffs against the United States. So we're waiting for the next set of tariffs will be put in place, announced first, any day now.
Now, Selina, U.S. companies speaking out, Intel saying this is a game changer to the American consumer. You've got Google, Dell, IBM all talking about how this is increasing cost on U.S. consumers. Walk us through the actual tech impacts here, because now we're talking about almost half of all goods that are imported to the U.S. from China being taxed.
Right. We've had Apple and Fitbit lobby very hard so they were able to get fitness trackers, wireless speakers, their AirPods off of that list. But we have heard tech companies speak out very strongly about this. It's going to hurt some of these telecom companies, chip makers, really companies that power the heart of the internet the hardest. And we have Intel saying that they manufacture and design most of their products actually in the U.S. And there's only a small part of the value chain that's done in China. That's the assembly aspect, and that is going to be taxed. And Intel says it's not really reasonable or possible for them to really shift that supply somewhere else. They're going to continue to need to assembly there. We have Google, Dell, IBM saying the tariffs are going to hurt American consumers the most, and it's actually going to put America behind in some of the most innovative technologies in the future, including 5G, and it could actually help China in a certain sense.
Amy, what are the choices facing these American companies right now? Certainly, they can always consider moving their production out of China. Nobody knows, though, as you said, how long this is going to last.
Absolutely. I think for Chinese companies, I agree with Selina. For American companies, moving their supply chain out of China is not something that can be done before January 1st, the date that these new tariffs are set to go from 10% rate to 25% rate. And so that's very difficult for American companies to make that shift so quickly. So as Selina just said, consumers are the ones who are going to really bear the brunt of this round of tariffs. However, in the meantime, American companies have to be thinking about what do they do to diversify their global supply chain. President Trump has made it very clear that bringing supply chains back to the United States is what he would like to see. And again, when we're talking about U.S.-China trade, this disentanglement between the United States and the Chinese economies is what many are starting to see as one of the goals of President Trump's very tough stance against China here.
Meantime, Selina, the president has, of course, threatened, to tariff all of the goods coming in from China. That means an additional $267 billion worth that has, thus far remained untariffed. Does that mean that those Apple products, that those fitness trackers, that our iPhones potentially will be hit?
We don't know yet what that actually means. We've seen some of these companies have a little bit of power in terms of getting sway. There were several hundred products that were left off this most recent list, some of it as a result of lobbying efforts from these companies. There's a lot of concern that, if Trump does that, China can ratchet up some of their other retaliatory measures, including increasing regulatory red tape, making it very hard for these American multinational companies to grow their business in China. And that would be hugely a huge issue for a company like Apple, and that's a big concern, making harder import inspections, more taxes, etc. And that's really the big concern as Trump continues to levy even stronger tariffs that China could put on even heavier regulatory burdens.
Now, Amy, China has pulled out from the negotiations, and they only have a certain amount of goods left that they can tariff. Of course, the U.S. imports far more goods from China than China imports from the United States. So how far do you see this tit for tat going, and how do you expect the Chinese to react?
Well, I think the Chinese pulled out of the prospect of talks this week and next because I think a reality is sinking in Beijing that waiting until after the midterm elections may offer better opportunity for actually making a deal. I think many in Beijing see that President Trump's actions, while some of it they characterize as containment of China. They also say much of it is in order to appeal to his base in advance of the midterm elections. And so maybe there's another opportunity to re-engage with talks after the midterms take place here and in advance of Presidents Trump and President Xi meeting on the sidelines of the G20 meetings at the end of November. That's an opportunity. To answer your other question, I think Selina really hit the nail on the head. China doesn't have that much more in the quantitative responses it can take to American policies. And so they've long said they will also be taking qualitative measures in response to the U.S. application of tariffs. That's going to include, as Selina already said, slowing approvals, delaying goods at customs, maybe increasing the amount of inspections that American manufacturers face on the ground in China, basically making it harder for American companies to operate there. This is in strong contradiction to what we just heard from Premier Li Keqiang when he was speaking at the WEF in Tianjin last week, and he said foreign investors do not face discrimination in the China market. We'll see what happens.